During training, they're free and loose and athletic, and they're trusting their talent.
Right.
And then I think when it's time to fight, I think they get caught up in the hype and the expectations, and I think that they think they need to be better than themselves. They think they need to do something different. They haven't worked on in prior practice. So one of the things I work with athletes on is almost make training or practice bigger than life. Add a little bit more emotion to it, and make it a little bit bigger in your mind. And then when you get to the fight night or the big situation, tone it down, downplay it. It's just kind of like when you really think about it, a fight is just like a fancy sparring practice.
So that's interesting. Are you saying maybe make the practice even bigger than the fight kind of thing? Like really build it up in your mind so like the fight becomes less of a big deal?
Absolutely. And I think that you use a lot of the expectations and and the hype and all the drama and thinking about results as motivational fuel for your training.
Right.
And so get up for it. Get a little bit more focused. Get a little bit like this means everything kind of attitude. And then when you get to the big day, don't look at it as the big day. Look at it as this is the same stuff I do every day. And it's just kind of like a reward for all my hard work, or it's just a special day. And I think a perfect example of that from another sport is Michael Jordan. And when he was in his, when he was playing with the Chicago Bulls, he looked at scrimmage as no different than Game 7 of the NBA Finals. He's in it to win it, and he's giving his absolute best effort. Now, that doesn't mean he wasn't, that doesn't mean he was trying to do anything that would, lead him to get injured in practice. But he was trying to win just as badly as if it was Game 7 of the NBA Finals. And so then when he gets to Game 7 of the NBA Finals, it's kind of like been there, done that, and that's actually how you become clutch. Is if you think you need to be better than yourself in those big moments, then it's too late. You should have been thinking that way in training. So, all the greats I think realized that let's make practice a little bit bigger, and then let's make the competition a little bit smaller in terms of the meaning associated to it.
Some fighters in the cage, they're trying to, talk to their opponent, throw them off their game, throwing their hands in the air, doing a lot of stuff to throw their opponent off. In those situations, what's the best thing for someone who's being a victim of that to do?
Yeah, I think, is not to look at yourself as a victim and, almost look at it as to your advantage, that if my opponent feels that he needs to do that, then he might not be confident in other areas of his game.
Right.
And I think Weidman did that with Silva. When Silva was doing a lot of the Muhammad Ali kind of stuff with him, he said it pissed him off, but it got him also more focused. And so he obviously used that to his advantage. Now, I do think in general the best strategy in terms of repaying the gift of gamesmanship is to ignore it. And to stay in your own bubble, and whatever you need to do to compete your best. Because the whole idea there is is for you to lose composure and focus.
So what's anchoring, and how can a fighter use that in the cage?
Well, there's different mental tips and techniques and strategies, and anchoring is kind of like getting a good positive emotional state. Thinking about maybe competing at your best, and then having a little physical trigger that helps to to call forth or bring forth that feeling that you want to have. So it might be, slapping your thighs or putting your thumb and your forefinger together. And, that kind of just brings up that good feeling inside that you want to have to compete your best.
If someone goes to the cage beforehand, sees a logo of an advertisement on the mat, and that sort of brings out a positive emotion in them, like feeling more comfortable in the cage and sort of having some positive affirmations with some of your surroundings in the cage, is that helpful?
I think so, because you almost want to have a focal point that you could look to either refocus or just to get something, get some positive energy from. So, like a common one in baseball is for, baseball player to look up at the top of the left field foul pole. It's always going to be there. And so they kind of, if they're getting like a little bit of that stinking thinking going on inside their head, they can look over at that. It's always going to be there. Take a deep breath, say something positive to yourself, and then, turn back toward home plate, and then you're ready to go.
Can fear of success hold someone back as well?
Yeah, I think fear of success is the number one enemy for for all performers.
Okay.
Most of us look at fear of failure.
Yeah.
But when you really think about it, we've all failed over and over and over again. So I think that fear of success is, we also talk about fear of failure a little more than fear of success. But I think fear of success is bigger because it's more subconscious and no one ever talks about it. But one of the reasons related to fear of success is the better we do, the better we have to do. And so there are incessant demands to live up to those expectations. And some of us, to be honest, might think, well, I'm not worthy of being number one, or, who am I? And, all those kind of thoughts, negative thoughts. But I think that expectations get, especially in professional sports, they get ridiculous. And so I think people subconsciously hold themselves back because I don't know if I'm ready for that yet.
Now, I remember Chael Sonnen said that he started seeing a sports psychologist at some point in his career because he felt at one point in his career he was dominating fights, but then he'd always get caught in a submission late in the fight. And he felt that it was like a mental issue as opposed to a physical one. Have you ever encountered athletes with like such a problem, and what might that issue be, or what might that problem be?
Well, yeah, I found it fascinating when Chael mentioned that, and I think it was great that he talked about it because I think it's way more common than we think. And
right.
So I think with a lot of athletes, I think it could be related to messages growing up, that we've heard, like, oh, if you're, don't be too cocky, or don't think you're the best, or it might be comments from parents or, family, when you're young, watching like maybe top competitors and other people around you are saying, oh, he's a jerk and he's this and he's that. So then we think, oh, well, if I become number one or if I win all the time, then everyone else is going to think I'm a jerk. And I want people to still love me, or it could be maybe I'll turn into a jerk, and I don't want to. So I think that that's a big part of it. I think for women athletes, it's even fear of success is even bigger because usually when I'm working with men's sports, the better the guy is, the more he's liked on the team. With women's sports, sometimes she's the least liked player on the team, the best player on the team, and so. A lot of, I think women feel like, okay, if I do bad, I feel like I let everyone down. But if I do really well, I feel like all the other girls are going to hate me.
Now, in your book, The Champion's Mind, you talk about accepting yourself unconditionally. And why is that important to do?
Well, I think it frees you up because I think that, your self-worth, as your value as a human being is never on the line. And so I think that if your identity is too attached to results and outcomes, then I think that you're going to be more inhibited. And when it's time to really free it up and trust your talent and go for the glory, I think you're going to hold back and almost fight not to lose rather than fighting to win. And so I think that the best approach in sports is really to think about I'm going to see how great I can be. And I really do have everything to gain, nothing to lose. And, so when you really think about it, when someone says they lost the fight or they lost the game, well, did they really ever have it in the first place? They just didn't win it. And so, they were just beaten by a better opponent that day, but they didn't really lose something because they didn't have it. It's like defending a title. You can't really defend it. You just have to win it again. And so because, the last fight, you can't go back. So I do think that that's important.
And you've got a good quote from Vitor Belfort in your book. He says, I do my best so there's no pressure. Can you explain that quote and why that's important?
Yeah, I mean, to me, part of it is also what's your definition of success. So the motto of the book, The Champion's Mind, is think gold and never settle for silver. And, what I mean by that is your personal best is your ultimate victory. And so I think when Vitor says, all I could do is my best, and that's what I'm going to do, so there's no pressure, you can't be better than your best. He's going to compete at his best. So why get caught up in any, in any sorts of negative pressure, because pressure, I think sometimes is, can we live up to it? Can we do, can we meet these expectations? But if your goal is to do your best, then that's always within your control.
Which fighter do you see as having a very strong mindset from a sports psychology perspective? Anyone come to mind as, having pretty strong mind?
I think Chris Weidman does.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he grew up with, I think he had, some brothers that were pretty tough on him growing up.
Right.
And so he learned mental toughness, he had for survival. But I think he has a really good mindset in terms of, just purpose and passion for his sport, and he's doing it because he loves it, but he's also highly competitive and wants to win, and I think he trains like he fights and then fights like he trains, kind of like what we talked about earlier, and that he does a whole lot of believing in himself. And I actually read a quote yesterday where he said that, at this level, 99% of everything is confidence and believing in yourself. So I think he's really strong mentally.
If a fighter is losing a fight and losing confidence and starts to feel that the other fighter is better than him during the competition, is that something which can be overcome in the middle of a fight? Like, is that can be, overturned in your mind?
Yeah, I think you have to. And I think that the ultimate goal, it's easier said than done. That's why, it's called mental training, so you got to work on this. But the ultimate goal is that your confidence, what's going on in the ring doesn't determine your confidence. Your confidence determines what's going on in the ring. So in other words, usually when we're least confident is when we need to be most confident.
Yes.
And so, anyone can be confident when things are going well.
Right.
So that's when you really need to dig deep and remember, you're not going to have a lot of time to do this in the middle of a fight, but remembering, all the hard work you put in and everything that you've done to get to this point. And like I said before, respect your, maybe I said this before, but you got to respect your competition, but you got to respect yourself even more. And so that's when you got to do a whole lot of believing in yourself. And to be honest, if you're down a little bit in a fight, well, you want that, and let's see what I could do back to you.
Right. Now, does living your regular life in the present moment help in this respect? Because if you do that in everyday life, I guess it'd be easier to see the opportunities that arise in every fresh moment kind of thing. Like, is this just sort of a thing you constantly have to practice in the everyday life sort of thing?
Yeah. So sports is a good training for life, and life is a good training for sports. So you're absolutely right. So, where does performance happen? It happens in the present moment, and that's where all our power is. And so, it could be, if you're driving to work and, or driving to the gym for these fighters, it's to be in the moment, maybe some Zen driving, just focus on your breathing and seeing what you're seeing out there on the road and, just being totally present. So then when you get to the gym, it's much easier to continue that way of thinking.
And I guess this ties into something else you talk about, like just making sure that you're focusing on the process and not just simply like the goal of winning. So like, just focusing, I guess, on the everyday process is very important for an athlete.
Yeah, the everyday process in terms of your routines and plans, but then also too, especially in a fight, you want to focus on the steps that lead to victory rather than the victory itself. And that always leads to higher performance because when you think about it, everything in the world is trying to get us to think about outcome and result.
Yes.
And so what I tell athletes is, hey, that can wait. Let the victory or the win chase you. Don't try to chase the win or the victory. And so, that to me, that's one of the cardinal rules of sports psychology and just the mental game is focus on the little steps that lead to success. And then, the outcome that you desire will likely be there when you reach it.
And is being in the zone something that you can consciously create, or is it just something that sort of happens naturally? You just sort of get into that sort of a state where things like, really seem to be clicking for you?
Yeah, I think that, there's different ways of looking at it. Like one way is that we're always in the zone. It's just that we get ourselves out of it. So, there's kind of a Zen saying that you can't enter a room you never left. So trying to get in the zone is trying to get in a room that you're already in. And so part of it's just reducing interference, mental interference, and you can do that by deep breathing and, being in the present like we talked about. But part of it, though, I also think the zone is overrated because, when I ask athletes, how often are you in the zone where everything's just clicking and everything's just falling into place, and they're like, oh, maybe 5% of the time. And so, my response is, well, let's work on the other 95% of the time, because when you're in the zone, just step on the gas.
Right, exactly. Now, does Zen Buddhism have a lot of, positive sort of things that can be applied, into sports as well?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, there's some great Zen stories that I talk about in the book, and wisdom and quotes, and I do think it gets to a lot of it gets to that being present, being right here, right now, and I think that again that's when we perform our very best.
Any new concepts emerging in sports psychology these days? Like anything interesting and new sort of being explored at all? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of what sports psychology talks about is related to Zen, where it's timeless. But then there's also some fascinating research on mental imagery and the brain and how the brain processes information and focusing strategies. And so what's amazing is just sports psychology hasn't been around that long, and there's just so much research that backs up a lot of these tips and techniques. So, maybe 30 years ago, someone might have said, well, visualization, that's kind of like daydreaming, and that's, that's not really helpful. Well, scores of experimental evidence supports mental imagery, and so I think that we're getting to a point where we know these mental skills and strategies are really powerful. We just need to employ them.
Excellent. That's perfect. So the Champion's Mind, that's definitely a terrific book. Very interesting, and just you can use it for sports, you can use it for life and anything, and people can pretty much get it at most bookstores, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's available everywhere. So it's on Amazon and Powell's Bookstore and Barnes and Noble and and so it should be available everywhere. And and that was my goal, is a book that can help you in all walks of life, and then and be the best you can be. And that's what life's all about, is just being full involvement in one's life. So I wanted to have a lot of practical tips and techniques and fun